52. All right, good afternoon, everybody. We're going to go ahead and it's 3 o'clock, so we're going to try to stick to our agenda on our timeline here and call the meeting of the Housing and Economic Development Committee for Wednesday, June 5th, 2024 to order. We do not have any public comment as of right now. Changes to the agenda. Chris Spawn had let us know that he was unable to make the meeting today. So number 9 on the agenda, the Office of Workforce Development report and discussion will likely happen at our July meeting. We'll get an update from Chris then. So that item is off the agenda. Are there any other changes to the agenda by members of the committee? All right, seeing none. We do have minutes to approve. If I could have a motion to approve the May 1st, 2024 minutes, moved by Mike Sigler, seconded by Ann Koreman. Since we are all present here in person, all those in favor? All right, that passes unanimously. We do have minutes from our special meeting on May the 21st, 2024 as well. If I could have a motion to approve those. Moved by Mike Sigler, seconded by Travis Brooks. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor? All right, that also passes unanimously. I do not have a chair's report today, and I will turn it over to our County Administrator, Lisa Holmes, for an update.
Thank you, Greg. I don't really have much of a report today either. I gave a report last night at the legislature meeting, updates. The only thing I will say is the small group continues to meet that is working toward a lower barrier shelter proposal with expected ending date by mid-July for consideration for the 2025 budget. So that work continues.
Great. Appreciate that work. If there's anything you need from us, don't hesitate to reach out, and appreciate everybody putting effort into that during what I know is a busy time trying to wrangle all the budget numbers in one spot. So thank you. Any questions for Lisa from members of the committee? I do see Kit just logged on, Kit Kephart, and just wondering, Kit, I don't mean to put you on the spot. If you had anything that you wanted to share with members of the committee from your standpoint or from where you sit as it relates to the work that you do?
Hi, Greg. I don't have a whole lot to share. I will say, in terms of numbers, we have 85 people in shelter right now, 7 children. The rest are adults. So that number's down a little bit from where it has been in the last little bit. I think Lisa just talked about kind of the process of talking about shelter programming. So obviously social services has been a part of that conversation. I don't think there's anything else that I really have to share right now that would pertain to this committee. But thank you for including us.
Of course, I appreciate it. It's helpful to have those that number and that update so we can stay on top of that as well. I guess too, I would, Kit, thank you. And thanks for joining in. I guess I would ask Liddy Barger as well. Liddy, if there was a quick update that you might want to share about the housing surge or anything that you're working on as it relates to the committee's work.
Sure. Excuse me. I'd be happy to share a quick housing surge update. It's kind of an exciting update. And so as I think people are aware, the housing surge has been ongoing. There have been 17 partners working together, coordinating the move-in for 40 households experiencing chronic homelessness in the Asteri project, which is the Green Street redesign. Tompkins Community Action is providing the support services. It's permanent supportive housing for folks. It's been funded through Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, or ESHI, you'll hear people calling it, if people are curious about its funding source. So Monday was move-in day for the majority of households that are moving into the space. It's been going very well. There has been a really high level of communication in between providers and people who are moving into the space, which has really made it a fairly smooth transition for 40 folks. Just about 20 of those people were in outdoor locations, prior to moving in. I know that's a question that folks have had. So it's about 20 folks who were living outdoors who have now moved into permanent supportive housing. There are 4 staff on site from Tompkins Community Action. They're on staff, full-time during the week and on call over the weekends. They have offices right there. And people are already sort of stopping by to see folks in Tompkins Community Action and asking great questions about their tenancy. So we're on day, 3 of folks moving in, and so far a success. There's 141 other units in the Asteri project that are not connected to the surge and are not supportive housing units necessarily. And I know that there has been a little bit of confusion about that, but as far as the surge and the continuum of care, we're really talking about just those set-aside Empire State Supportive Housing Initiative, ESHA units, and the affordable housing units can be accessed through a regular application process. I think it's asteriithaca.com. And they're still taking applications for those affordable units.
That's great.
That's my little update.
No, I appreciate that. The question I have, of the 40 households, how many were you able to move in so far?
I think that 39 of them have moved in.
Great.
So, yeah.
That's amazing.
Yep.
That's awesome. 20 people who were in other outside locations. I mean, that's the process working. So
It's working.
that's amazing. Any questions from members of the committee for Liddy? All right. Well, I appreciate the update, Liddy. Thanks for keeping us informed, and we'll look forward to next month hearing how the 31 days of it has been going. So thanks for the day 3 update.
Thanks.
All right. Next, we have our Planning and Sustainability Department. All of you, please come forward. We're just a few short of the whole office.
Well, I like to involve staff. Of
course.
They're the ones who do the hard work. They should get the recognition.
We like to have your staff here as well. So, Katie, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce today our newest planner. Shauna Stevenson is joining us, coming most recently from Binghamton. She will be serving as the Housing and Community Development Planner in the office. So just wanted to introduce her to this committee. Shauna, you want to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, sure. Nice to meet you all. My name's Shauna Stevenson, and I just graduated from Binghamton University from the Geography Department. While I was there, I was studying climate change resilience and community engagement in those issues, and I was also part of the Johnson City redevelopment monitoring project there, where we were just, looking at real estate trends while the university and the hospital are buying properties in Johnson City, New York, which is adjacent to Binghamton. And before that, I was Director of Programs and Marketing with the Broome County Arts Council, where I worked on countywide projects to promote the arts, and also a Tri-City project to get murals up in the Binghamton area. So I'm happy to be here.
Great. Well, welcome. You have an important role to fill in the department, and we look forward to working with you. Any comments or questions for Shauna from members of the committee?
Welcome.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say welcome. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thank
and
you.
I know it's a broad spectrum of issues that we deal with regarding housing, so we know it'll take a while to get up to speed, and any way we can help, let us know.
Thank you.
All right, Katie.
Thank you, Shauna. So the other item I wanted to bring as part of Commissioner's report is an update on the county partnership program that we, mostly Nick, putting in the heavy work, recently applied for, and just a wrinkle in that application that we wanted to give you an early heads up on, and that there will be a decision point, hopefully, if we get awarded funds in the future. So Nick, do you want to fill in a bit?
Sure, yeah. So thanks. We did get the application in for the county partnership program. This is the State Connect All grant program that was announced back in April, where counties could apply to expand broadband to unserved locations in partnership with an internet service provider. We worked with Chuck Bartosh and Point Broadband as our internet service provider, and continued to work with the folks at ECC Technologies to help prepare the application. So one of the wrinkles, as Katie mentioned, is that project management costs were not included as an eligible use of funds, which is, we found a bit unusual in our experience with grants. That's typically a cost that can be, the grant can be applied toward. So we had sort of a decision to make in the application process as to whether or not the county would serve as the recipient of the funds or whether the funds would be awarded directly to the internet service provider. We went with the former, where we indicated the county would prefer to receive the funds and then disperse them out to the ISP under the condition that we can figure out how to fund a project management expense as a part of this project. So I've been working with the folks in county administration to put together a capital budget item regarding this that you should see in the coming months, assuming, of course, we're awarded funding. If we're not awarded funding, it's all moot. This is something that you'll see going forward. If we're not able to include that in the budget, we have indicated to the state that we would prefer that the funds go directly to Point Broadband as the ISP to build out the network in those locations. So we expect there's a few decision points here, both at the grant acceptance stage and potentially later on in the budget approval process. So just a little heads up on that. Was not something we were expecting in this process, and something that we want to keep everybody informed on. So,
Ann?
Thank you. I thank you for the update, and sorry there's a glitch in that or a bump in the road. Hopefully it's just a small bump in the road. So I didn't quite understand it. So regarding having the county, the funds go to the county, but what that has to do with the project management.
Right. So if the funds go to the county, we would be required to do the reporting on the project, as in submitting the reports to the state and indicating whether or not the infrastructure has been deployed as specified. We don't have the staff capacity or expertise to really do that, so we would need to bring in some external project management support. The concept right now is to expand, or I should say extend our contract with ECC Technologies to perform that role. So they've provided us with a quote for that cost that would take us through the end of the project, basically through the end of 2026.
And so you're going to see if we can get that into as a capital expense in the county's budget. Mm-hmm. I guess I don't understand what was the reasoning if we don't get the grant?
If we don't get the grant, there won't be any need for this at all.
The grant for the capital expense? Is that what you're looking at?
No, the grant overall, if we don't get the millions of dollars from the state agency, then there's no project to oversee. So if we get the grant, there'll have to be a decision made as to whether, in accepting this grant, you're willing to fund oversight and management to the tune of roughly $570,000. It's not a small amount of money. Or if you would prefer it go directly to the internet service provider and kind of take the county out of being in the middle of it, but have less control over the project. So we wanted to raise the issue because it's not small dollars, and there's some decision points, and we don't want to surprise you with something that might need a quick turnaround. So if you have questions that you'd like us to get clarity on from the state or anything like that, we're happy to do that.
So one more question. So if we get the grant from the state, I guess that's the part I'm still stuck on. If we don't get the funds from the state, what would we be having go right to the ISP provider?
So the state basically gave us two options in the application. One was the county is the recipient of the funds, or the second was the ISP is the recipient of the funds. And if the ISP is the recipient of the funds, the county is basically cut out of the process. We don't have really any insight or oversight or knowledge of what's happening. And I think it would, there'd be sort of a lot of, uncertainty, I think, in this room about what's the status of the project. So that was why we decided to go with the other option initially. So,
And just to clarify, though, if the ISP is the recipient of funds, New York State handles the project management portion of the project, right?
We
Well,
hope.
the internet service provider is on the hook for it.
To respond back to the state to keep the accountability.
Yes, yes. And I will say, Norma Jane often brings up, there are staff costs associated with the county being the recipient of these funds too, from administration and planning.
Even if we get contract out to do part of it, right?
correct.
Yes, right.
Okay.
And finance, I think, too.
Yes.
I think all of the funding for the internet service provider would come through the finance department as well, the state payments to the internet service provider as well as to the project management would come through the finance department.
So is the linchpin whether the county approves the expense to be in the capital program? Is that decide whether it's going to be at the county or through the ISP? Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, you're right.
Okay.
They're dependent on receiving the grant from the state for the project.
Yeah, right. The state will be the first one to decide whether the project is moving forward. Then the county will be deciding at whether we're going to have the project management on our end or at the state.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on this topic? I just want to remind folks, to Katie's point too, it's what was the request for, $7+ million?
About $12.5 million.
12.5, okay, all right, well, it's good, great, even more. Right, so, so one of the things we have to weigh is what the return on the investment is, the impact on the broader community. It's a lot of money, but it's also it's a reasonable amount of money to get a $12 million project that we can have oversight for and not just rely on New York State to manage, and we actually have a voice in the process. But it's a decision we'll have to weigh with all the other things we've got coming down the pipe. So, all right, Katie, what's next on, do you have any other items for your commissioner's report?
I do not. Thank you.
Okay. We have Community Housing Development Fund Round 24 Awards, ID number 12459. And I believe we have Megan McDonald right there. There you are. I looked up and you're on the screen. So I'll turn it over to you.
There. Thank you. Yeah, sorry not to be there in person with my colleagues today, but I'm a bit under the weather.
Feel better.
This is just reporting back since we just met with our Program Oversight Committee to review the Community Housing Development Fund Round 24 applications. We had 5 applications, 4 of which were recommended for funding, as I've detailed in the memo. And I'm not asking for any action today. This has just been our tradition to keep the committee updated. And then as we proceed, some projects require seeker if they involve county funds and are certain actions. So we'll be coming to you later on with when those projects are ready to move forward with any resolutions that involve dispersing either the county's traditional funds or any of the IDA developer contribution funds through their workforce policy. And we're hoping that some more funds through those IDA workforce policy contributions to the program arrive over the summer, in which case we're tentatively hoping to meet again in mid-August to see what else we can do, since we were not at all able to meet applicants where they were asking to be given the extent of the demand on a very limited supply of funds.
Also to note, Ann Koreman, legislator member of this committee, is also chair of the Community Housing Development Fund. So Ann, if there's anything you want to add, or if there's questions by members of the committee about this update, happy to take those and entertain those now.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Sure, I'll say a little bit. I just want to thank Megan, because it was as you saw, it was quite a lot of asks we had this time, and it was a challenge to go through all the applications. So thank you for meeting with me before the meeting to go through it all and parse it all out and understand it, and for guidance before and during the meeting. And I wanted to thank the members that are on the committee that goes over the applications too and makes our recommendations to us. So there's another layer in there also. So I wanted to thank everybody in it, and also all the participants who put money in, because even under difficult circumstances, we all seem, you know, and I get a little worried, we all seem to, when we sit down, we all seem to be very collegial in figuring out how to get the money out to, you know, as best we can. And so I wanted to thank Megan and everybody else.
I do like to see that there was at least a couple of for sale units on there. I think that's an important piece of the equation, right? Obviously, rental units is an important thing, and we need to keep growing that, but also to create some stability and financial freedom for folks to have those for sale opportunities in as affordable a fashion as possible, I think is great to see. So thanks for the work, Megan and team. Anything else for Megan on this topic? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Veronica, I apologize.
I guess could either Megan or Annie give just a brief little description of what each of these projects is? Like I can see in the table, but yeah, more than that. I just basically see number of units and municipality.
Yeah, so the Freeze Road Apartments in the town of Dryden, that's actually specifically in the hamlet of Varna. Some of you maybe recall the days of the Mount Varna kind of name, and so that property where there have been some other market rate projects proposed in the past. That's a low-income housing tax credit project, and our understanding is there is going to be one round this year, so they are applying for that for the 9% tax credits. And that's 53 rental units. That also has a housing insecure youth component built in, because tax credit projects typically have some priority populations that they like to see units set aside for. The Meadow on Seneca is down in the city of Ithaca, and that project is also a 9% LIHTC project, or low-income housing tax credit project. And that does include some units that may be used for people transitioning from homelessness, domestic violence, and some other things. Again, the state guidelines encourage some of those specialized units. And so these projects typically have, some partners helping with services and things for those special needs as well. And then the Huga Street redevelopment project, this is kind of a new one for this program. It's actually rehabbing the upper floors of 2 adjacent downtown buildings, and involves some other New York State grant money as well. And so that will create 18 rental units right in the city of Ithaca on Huga Street. And then the Compass redevelopment phase 2 is also kind of a new type of application for the program, because this is the manufactured home park that in Trumansburg that INHS, through its affiliate Better Housing for Tompkins County, purchased a couple years ago. And so this will add some new for sale units, and it's a little different than their community housing trust model since it's a park, but because it's owned by kind of a mission-driven affordable housing organization, they have a commitment to keep those lot rents not drastically increasing to help preserve affordability there. And that we weren't able to meet their request, and so right now we're likely only funding 2 units there. But it will be kind of a test for the future, as they've got other lots in that project and potentially other phases of development.
Cool, thank you.
All right, if there's no other questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. Thanks so much, Megan. Next, we have resolution to authorize funding for the Housing Affordability and Supportive Infrastructure Grant Program for 2024 Town of Danby Community Development Block Grant, Grant Writer Support, ID 12464. I'll go ahead and move that. If I could have a second. Seconded by Veronica. And I will turn it over to Haley to give us a little introduction to that resolution.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Haley Delisle, the Sustainability Coordinator. Normally, I wouldn't be doing this program, but it will be transitioning over to Shauna, so you'll have to bear with me. This is my first time. So the Housing Affordability and Supportive Infrastructure Grant Program has $20,000 allocated in the 2024 budget, and we received an application from the town of Danby. This is their second time applying through this program, and they're looking to get $8,000 to have a consultant write a proposal for a CDBG or Community Development Block Grant fund for the rehabilitation program. They did this a couple years ago and were able to help 12 homes be rehabbed, and so they looked at things like health and safety and also energy efficiency work, and they actually have a wait list of 4 homes so far and other interest in the community. So just to take a step back, this grant program basically offers seed money to municipalities to go after larger pots of money or complete studies. After reviewing the application, we think they're a good candidate. It is above the $5,000 limit, so we're taking it to you all and to the legislature to be approved. I also want to call out one discrepancy that you might see. The application requests $10,000, but upon having a phone conversation with Greg, the planner from the town of Danby, they actually only need $8,000, and so we lowered the amount so that those funds would still be available for other municipalities to take advantage of.
Great, thank you. Any questions by members of the committee on the resolution? Okay, well, seeing none, all those in favor? All right, that's unanimous.
Thank you.
Great job on your first one.
Thanks.
Maybe your last. Yeah, you can check that one. You're batting 1,000.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you so much. All right, next on the agenda, we have a hotel room occupancy tax law, ID 12460. Discussion, no action anticipated from this discussion. This is just kicking off a conversation that came from our regular legislature meetings and what it would mean to make a change to the tax law, how that process works, and kind of what spurred this is looking at potentially adding some percentage to address some of the financial needs and support some of the operations at the airport, which is a driver of bringing people here and bringing people back home to wherever that may be. So Nick, I'll turn it over to you. I know you did a lot of research on this, but I'll let you sort of lead the way.
Sure, and I'll just share a little bit of what I've learned, and I think this is really just opening up a discussion about this topic. Certainly don't have anything that's ready for action or approval today, yeah, this as you mentioned, it came up about 2 weeks ago, and so after that started to dust off some research that I had done back in 2019. This was during the point when the city of Ithaca was exploring adding its own hotel room occupancy tax, just to review what, if any of that had changed. So yeah, just some quick highlights. Of New York's 62 counties, all but 5 have some form of a hotel room occupancy tax. They go by a few different names, but I'll just use that as sort of the generic name for all of them. Ours in Tompkins County is 5%. There are 4 counties that have occupancy taxes that are higher than ours. Those are Albany, Monroe, Onondaga, and Otsego. In addition, New York City and Suffolk County also have taxes that are higher than ours, and those are at 5.857 or 875% in New York City and Suffolk County at 5.5%. And the rest of everybody else kind of falls in that 3 to 5% range. In addition to that, there are at least 40 state enabling laws for occupancy taxes in cities, villages, or towns. And a lot of these are concentrated downstate in Westchester and Orange County, but they're also spread throughout the state, including in the city of Ithaca. So I didn't get into the level of detail to really read through all of these state enabling laws to determine what exactly they're allowed to spend funding on. I can say from some other research I was able to compile, there's at least one county, Clinton County, that indicated that some portion of its hotel room tax consistently goes into funding its airport operations. I would be surprised if they're the only one. I'd imagine there are other ones. It may not be spelled out in their legislation or other policies, however. So yeah, we, certainly this to go about a change like this would require a change to the state law. Exactly how that process plays out, I still have some details to learn. We'll definitely be leaning on folks here within the county who are more familiar with processes at the state level to help guide through that step. Once the state law is changed, we would go ahead and change our local law here to reflect those changes and enact them. So. It's a long process, but like as was discussed a few weeks ago, the potential here is that we could produce a sustained source of funding for the airport. There are a few things to consider, however. A lot of the state enabling laws for hotel occupancy taxes have sunset dates. This is something we do not have in our Tompkins County law. We're a bit of an exception in that regard, as I've gathered. So there's, I'd say, a strong chance that if we do go in for an amendment to this law at the state level, that there'll be a request or potentially a requirement that it include a sunset clause that would require us to reauthorize the law every 3 to 5 years, depending on its continued need. So. That's one thing that may be a concern or consideration going forward. And of course, anytime something goes up in front of the Assembly or Senate, there's the possibility that something else will get attached to it that we didn't expect. So just, I think, something to keep in mind. Yeah, that's the basic, gist of the research that I've gotten so far. Yeah, I'd say, we're there is some headspace for us to consider increasing our hotel room occupancy tax. However, we are already kind of close to the top, particularly considering that the city of Ithaca has a separate, or I should say an additional 5% tax. So for those hotel rooms in Ithaca, the effective tax rate is already 10%. So increasing the county tax rate would bring that up to 11%. And definitely put us in the sort of upper echelon of tax rates across the state. I'd say, personally and, anecdotally, I have a little concern about that from the perspective of, not necessarily the independent traveler or family traveler who is relatively insensitive to the tax rates, but from the sort of event planners who are looking at booking conferences or meetings or large events in the county. They're often, much more sensitive to tax rates and are shopping on price in a different way than individual travelers. So there is some concern I have on that regard as well. That's basically, I'm happy to answer questions if folks have them and actually, kind of start this discussion and hear where the committee's at on where, this topic.
Well, Nick, thanks for doing the research and for what will likely be continuing to do even more research on the topic. For members of the committee, thoughts on continue down this path with caution and apprehension, with gusto and speed or whatever. What are our thoughts? Ann?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear the research that you've done, Nick, and I know it's not comprehensive, but it's quite a lot more than I've done. So just mulling over the idea of, we have this new, say, conference center, and that I just recently got a tour of, which is really great, conference center, and just thinking about, you know, we need to weigh that unintended consequences if someone is looking at, say, booking a conference here, and they're looking at housing their folks in the different hotels, you know, which, if that increases the prices and people aren't coming here from out of town, and there's probably a good percentage of them that might be flying in because there's no trains here. Buses actually hard to get here. So just trying to think about that as we go forward. Would that actually help the airport, you know, in some way or not, as we're trying to get more folks here for the conference center?
Other thoughts from members of the committee? Mike?
Well, I mean, I don't really think people are flying here and staying in the hotels. So I think that's kind of a disconnect. I think they're flying here and doing business at Cornell.
Can you use your mic?
I can.
Thank you.
I'm interested to know how many people are flying here and staying in hotels. I mean, that's no reason not to do the tax and give it to the hotel or to the airport, but I mean, it would seem to me more people are flying here for Cornell. And I don't know how to reconcile that.
Maybe somebody has the stats.
Katie?
Yeah, well, just, that's one of the questions that was asked in the new visitor profile study that's being conducted right now. So we'll have some good information on that, actually.
Actually, next week at the Strategic Tourism Planning Board meeting, we'll have a preview of the data that we're collecting on the visitor profile study. So encouragement to attend and see what's already come in. Yeah, we are getting updated data on arrival vehicle mode. So,
well, I know the liaison to the STVB, and they're particularly good. So, yeah, I'm excited for that meeting, actually.
You know, I hear that question for sure, Mike. But I also wondered, I would go out on a limb and wonder to say there's probably more people flying in here and staying in hotels than there are property taxpayers that are living in Tompkins County flying out of ITH, right? I bet at a percentage level, there's more that are doing that. So where should the tax be placed? Should the airport finance, budget be placed on property taxes to cover deficit? Mm-hmm. Or should there be opportunity through tourism dollars to cover that? Like that's what I'm weighing. And Travis, I see your hand.
Yeah, you pretty much went where I was going. I'm not a fan of property tax paying taxes going to the airport at all. Most folks in Tompkins County have to travel for more affordable tickets outside of this area. So I would like us to continue to investigate and see what this process would look like and see if it's worth doing so that the burden is taken off of taxpayers.
No, I mean, it's a fine argument. Yeah. Does the Statler pay hotel tax?
Yes.
Yes.
Cool. All right.
Veronica, just not to put you on the spot, just give everybody an opportunity to speak.
Sure. I will admit I did not comprehend everything that Nick said all at once because I'm more of a visual person, sorry. Okay. But I think it sounds like it's definitely worth looking into the state law changing process. I don't know. I mean, that's easy for us to say because it's not our burden to do that work. But even if we get ourselves allowed to use our taxes on the airport, that doesn't mean we actually have to. But the point about property tax dollars versus tourism tax dollars funding something that is used more for people who live not in Tompkins County than in it, most likely, is a good one. And I think that's a good reason to pursue this.
I also think too, and again, I always try as a member of their service board, and Katie as well, The airports, and a lot of people are working really hard to try to find solutions to lower the cost of air travel out of a small regional airport. And that is not an easy task, right? It's a lot of chicken or the egg. And you don't really ever know which, you need more people flying out of there to lower the prices, but you need the prices lower for more people to fly out of there. So it really is a tough position to be in, and looking at, sometimes low-cost carriers are great, but they come with their own set of, challenges as it relates to the airport and operations. And it's an incredible asset that we have a regional airport as strong as we do in our area. It also is, at times, can feel like a burden because we don't have the volume in our area, either flying in or out, but we're working on that. And as I think we recover from the pandemic, if you look at pre-pandemic, everybody probably thought, wow, this airport is great, right? It's booming, it's taking care of itself, it just got remodeled, life is good, and then the world as we knew it sort of disintegrated, and we started to have to put it back together. So I don't want in this conversation the airport to be a point of contention or there to be negativity around the airport. There are real challenges and real operational challenges that we need to assist them in addressing. The other thing I want to say is I do hear that the additional increase in tax, and again, I'm not one to quickly increase taxes. You all know my position on tax increases. But a 1% tax increase on room tax, what that potentially means, let's say it's a $240 rate, right? Is the $2.40 going to be the decision maker? Or is the fact that it's 11%? That's probably the issue, but we're already at 10%. So the question I have is the $2.40 going to be, okay, so 10% room tax plus 8% sales tax, so it's 18% taxes on that room. We can't really control the 8%. But the 10%, 5 of the 10 is within our control. 5 is at the city level, which they made the decision. We supported that decision to do. So I don't know. That's kind of where is the benefit, is it going to outweigh the detriment? And that's where I think we kind of need to be looking. Nick?
Yeah, I should have also mentioned, one of the things that I hear anecdotally from folks working on the conference center also is one of the impediments to getting more conferences to Ithaca is the lack of air service. So this is, again, getting to this sort of chicken and egg problem of, attracting business here. With less air service, it's harder to attract major conferences and meetings. With more air services, it's easier. The trade-off is we may have a higher tax rate. And at the 8%, I didn't mention the sales tax because we can't do anything. I don't expect we're going to change that. Yeah. So, yeah.
Katie?
Well, I'm wondering if one of kind of the due diligence steps we could take would be to, maybe Nick, you could contact the other 3 counties in New York State who have higher room tax than us to see if they've seen an impact from that. Because from your research so far, the combined city-town taxes, it's only Cayuga, Onondaga, and Niagara that are currently higher than what we're at. So it's not a lot of people to talk to. We could do that.
I mean, I definitely don't want to see shirts that says Ithaca is room tax either. So, we need to be mindful of these things. Go ahead, Annie.
Yeah, I just wanted to add into our discussions for as we go on, because today we often talked about tourism, but we did mention, people come here for business, and we want more people to come here for business. So maybe just think about that as we're saying, not just tourists but business people who are traveling here on business.
Yeah, and I think maybe to Mike's point about some of the Cornell travel, a lot of that can be room tax exempt travel depending on the nature of why they're coming to Cornell and those type of things. So, it's definitely a fair point. Sometimes even when you are coming for business, one of our biggest businesses or entities is higher education. And sometimes those visitors too can be tax exempt, but we definitely have.
Room tax exempt?
Yes. Yeah, so any charity, any 501c3 or unit of government is exempt from room tax if that's the party that's paying for the lodging.
And so that would be interesting going forward to have, as we discuss this, like how many organizations might come here for conferences that are exempt. Also, I'd like to see maybe somebody from the airport to come and talk to us, because if we're looking at this, adding this, at what point would this help make costs for not just the pay for the airport, from a tax, from the folks who live here in Tompkins County, that's one aspect. But then we talked about the other aspect. Is there a point where this might help lower the costs for fares going in and out of Ithaca? And I don't know what that point would be.
Yeah, I think that's something that we can work with Josh and Roxanne at the airport on understanding, and maybe a discussion we can have even at an air service board of how would an additional, room tax injection or an additional amount of funding, wherever that funding may come from, how could that potentially help either reduce, expenses and ultimately create lower fares and things like that. Travis, I saw your hand up as well.
Nick, isn't that tax exemption just for agencies in New York State? Because I know when we travel for the city for GEC, which is a 501, we don't get that outside of New York.
It varies from state to state and location to location. In our tax law, if you're set up as a tax exempt organization in a different state, you can use that tax exemption in New York to get exempt from room tax.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it's sort of a smorgasbord of different approaches.
Room and sales tax.
That's
right?
correct. Yeah. Basically, if you're sales tax exempt, you can be exempted from room tax.
Okay.
So I'm going to go out on a limb, and if there's any objection by members of the committee, speak up. But I think we should continue this conversation based on a sense of the committee. I think, Nick, maybe we can connect if this is something, and how we engage the STPB around this and ask for their input and include that voice in the conversation. Katie from the Air Service Board perspective, and the folks at the airport, Lisa, Katie, and then also, Peggy and Jennifer with the CVB, and bring all those sort of pieces together at the next appropriate time to convene. Maybe we can have Brett come as well, and Peggy, can be at the table for the conversation, Roxanne, and have a more robust conversation too within the committee to see what that might mean. And then Nick also give a little bit more time to maybe lay out a roadmap or path forward for a potential change. And then trying to understand the sunsetting and reauthorization and what are some of the pros and cons to dealing with that. Is that a fair assessment for everybody on the committee? And
yes,
from a staff perspective, does that seem reasonable?
Yeah.
Katie?
I would just say it might be worth, if you wanted to reach out to Roxanne and find out whether the consultant working on the strategic business plan might be able to incorporate some thinking into that, because I don't think that contract is done yet, because they have a whole team working on the economics of the airport.
and might they have some stats for people who are currently using the airport? I don't know if they do surveys there of, are people coming in for business, pleasure? Are they staying at hotels?
Yeah, I can follow up with Roxanne. All right, that, Nick, I think concludes that portion of the discussion. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Katie, thank you as well. I think next up we have Peggy Coleman, Director of the Convention and Visitors Bureau and Vice President of the Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce, to give us the Visit Ithaca Annual Report. That's ID 12402. So we'll give Peggy a minute to come to the table and get settled in. Jennifer, you're welcome to join as as well, since you're the next one up on the list, if you'd like.
Yes. Jennifer is the IT department since my sound is not working on my computer.
Got it.
Yes. First. Oh, okay. Yeah. I kind of thought. Okay. So, hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Sorry for the delay in getting ourselves situated. And also, thank you for your patience in moving us forward to this month. I really appreciate it. So, everyone, I think, does know me, but just in case, the Tompkins Chamber and Visit Ithaca, we are the contracted organization to provide destination marketing services on behalf of Tompkins County. And so I come to you at least annually, although sometimes more frequently, to just kind of share our work or talk about budgets, et cetera. But this is my favorite time of year when I get to speak with you, is to share some of the successes from the previous year. And rather than me rattling on with about a lot of information, we have a short video that we want to share that celebrates our work. So hopefully Jennifer's technology will work better than mine did. While we're working on that, I did pass out our new travel guide. Those are about 2 weeks, give or take, hot off the press. We were able to get them delivered in time for Memorial Day weekend, which is also Cornell commencement weekend. So that's always a big off of our plate and our minds to make sure we have it once we hit peak season. So, okay, Jennifer, if you. Okay.
We don't know. We were.
Fingers crossed this is going to work.
And we're going to be relying on the people on Zoom to tell us if they can't hear this, because you'll probably all be able to hear it.
Want to mute your computer?
That may mute the video.
It's going to mute the video if I do that. That's, yeah.
You mute your microphone on your computer. So the computer can't hear you.
I think that may cause the sound to not work.
And I am muted in the Zoom, so.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, that's probably all you need to do.
The sound is not coming up.
I feel my technical gremlins may have it spread over. Sorry about that.
Jennifer, if you just want to hold 1 second. Go ahead, Taylor.
Rob's going to come down to offer some assistance.
Great. We'll take a quick 2-minute pause. It's okay.
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
While you're doing that, I'm going to ask you about this, Peggy. And what I say by this is the Visit Ithaca guide here.
Mm-hmm.
Is this something that businesses are able to get a copy of to hand out or distribute within their place of business, or something that's just in the visitor center?
We have them available at the visitor centers, both downtown and also at Teganic, and then we have a supply at our Brindley Street main offices where we have our main storage. Absolutely, we want them out and about in the community for people to be able to access. There's also a digital version, so if people want to be a little bit more sustainable and not have paper, they can go to our website and download a digital copy. Our goal is to try to distribute as many of them as possible outside of the market, though, outside of Tompkins County proper, so that the visitors use it as an incentive tool to come and visit our destination.
Yeah, had some friends come from Toronto this for Ithaca Festival, and they took this and some other ones back with them for future visits.
Fantastic. We love Canadians, so thank you, Annie, for bringing them down.
Me too.
Yeah, one of the things that I also see in here that's really helpful from an accessibility standpoint is, the sort of plan your stay section.
Yes.
And where you show pet-friendly and accessible locations. I think that, oftentimes people will ask, and to have I say ask because I have some lodging establishments that I work with, but yeah, this is really, really helpful. And the depth of information, the professional nature, this is really well done. So kudos to all of the people, I'm sure, that worked on this.
Absolutely. We really lean into the feedback that we get directly from visitors through our live chat, as well as in our visitor centers, to really help inform what is critical and important, as well as monitoring trends through our website and what we're seeing happening. And from our own organizational goals, as well as this community, this county's goals. Accessibility and sustainability are priorities. So I will be quiet.
And Jennifer really wants us to play. She's rolling the music on your speech.
I was trying to make sure it was back at the beginning, but
okay.
We did, just so you all know, we did test this, and we did have this on.
Yes.
So I'm not sure what happened between the office and here, but we got it back.
Awesome.
Thank you.
To all the people.
If you want to go ahead and play it, we're ready.
Sure. Everyone's ready?
So finally, we got it to work. Yay. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, too. I think it's very hard to condense 12 months of work into a few moments or a few pages that are in a written report. And the team, they are dedicated to this destination. We are so fortunate that this is an attractive and inviting community to everyone around the world, literally. And it is our absolute pleasure to be able to promote this county. So we've had a lot of growth over this last year. The Ithaca Loves Teacher celebration, that one stat alone, over $209,000 of economic impact in a 12-day period. in February, at the time of year when we need it the most. Reaching out to do those accessibility surveys so that we can make sure we're opening up our community to other audiences who have not known they could visit us. Those are just some of the things that we've been involved in and engaged in. And ultimately, tourism, it's the business of fun, but it is business. And we have saved every single household in Tompkins County $806 in property taxes. All of the services that everyone in this county enjoys, if that visitor spending went away, that would have to be paid for by the people who live here. And so tourism does work for our county. It's an economic engine, and I am truly delighted to be here to answer any questions that's in the written report, in the video you saw, or go in depth on any other topics you might want to talk about today.
Well, thank you. I guess first, members of the committee, any comments from, there was a printed report in your packets, and then it pretty much mirrors the information shared in the video. Mike?
In there, you said you had gone to a conference and there were 28 contacts with potential people for the
conference center.
Conference center, and you said you closed 7 of those.
Yes.
Can you give us an idea of kind of what those 7 are?
Sure. So our first event that is going to take place is July 24th through the 25th. The pieces of business that we're targeting for the conference center are events that will use not just the conference center space, but also hotel rooms, focusing on a Sunday through Thursday pattern as opposed to just weekends. We all know, except for, December, January, February, the rest of the year, almost Wednesday through Saturday nights take care of themselves. So we've been very intentional about that. We have a group that is focusing on people with other disabilities. And so that's a very exciting thing for us to host here. We have been working on mostly state associations. We've not branched out too far into regional business. They're mostly professional trade associations right now.
Cool. All right.
Average size on the target list is, the sweet spot is about 450 people to maximize the entire center.
Other questions? Veronica?
First, congratulations. This is very impressive, and we don't often get to have a presentation where everything is just like thriving, so well done. I'm curious how the Ithaca Loves Teachers event, I guess having been a teacher, I'm familiar with how it looks for a teacher locally, and that it's timed with a break, like a February break or whatever they call it in our school district. How does that land, how does the timing work, and how do you market it outside of ICSD or Tompkins County or even out of the state?
Yeah, absolutely out of the state too. We just finished our 14th year of the Ithaca Loves Teachers celebration. It used to be called Winter Recess because it was the winter recess, but not everybody has the same dates during their winter recess period. And it really was a celebration of teachers, so why not, the KISS method, let's call it what it is, right? And the way that we market to educators is our team goes through and researches throughout all of New York State and northern Pennsylvania when those break periods are, to find out what are those dates where we're going to be able to encompass as many people as possible. We do direct mailings to all of the school districts with collateral. We begin our promotions at the New York State Fair. Having been at the fair, we know that a lot of educators come to the fair looking for ideas for their students, so that's another outlet where we begin. We have a pretty extensive database of people who have registered in the past. Since 2021 celebration, we have had a digital pass on phones. Prior to that, people would actually register physically and share their email address and mailing address, some of them cell phones, which is always amazing to me. I'm like, wow, you just give your phone out to everybody. That's very trusting. And so we've built up a very specific database, and so we are marketing via email, we are sending direct messaging, we are doing social posts to reach them directly to the school districts, and we have a lot of repeat visitors. And one of my favorite visitors is a teacher who came from the Shenango Valley School District. She came in 2019 was her first year, and she came by herself. And the following year, she bought a full bus of educators from her school district, and they did a wine tour along Cayuga Lake. They came and they stayed overnight. So one individual having a really great positive experience brought 50 of her friends back.
Nice to have 50 friends to bring.
Wine tours do that, you know.
Good point. Any other questions? I just want to say, as I think I hopefully have said each time we've had this update, the importance of the CVB and Visit Ithaca in our community and the impact that that plays. I know it sometimes can be a thankless job, it can be a misunderstood job. People may not be clear on what it is you all do at times, right? And I feel like each year, as the curtain gets pulled back a little bit more and more, and just to sort of see, just from the content that you all are creating and the visuals and the reports and just how your organization continues to grow with the market and support the market, it's really refreshing to see. And the thing that really stands out to me is the year over year on packet page 33, the leads sent, leads booked, the economic impact of that group business that comes in through your organization, and really being the convener and collaborator with all of the tourism and hospitality partners within our region, because they are in competition with each other, but they are all in competition to support and grow the market together, and that's the role that you all play, as well as educating the end consumer on why this is such a great place to visit. So I appreciate that, and as a former hospitality worker myself, this definitely is work that's near and dear to my heart. So thank you, and thank your team, and please express the gratitude we have, because tourism is a vital part to our thriving economy, and we need to continue to push the bar and raise the expectation and raise the services and options that we have for our visitors. And without a strong CVB and group and organization like yourselves, we can't do that. So thank you.
It is truly our pleasure. And the other piece that I don't talk a lot about, because we're always like, get it done and then keep moving, we're working in the future. The services that our team provides, as far as just basic technical assistance and training, working in collaboration with Nick as far and through the grants programs and things, there are a lot of other businesses that wouldn't be touched otherwise, and it is truly exciting to see a business go from an idea to welcoming people to then expanding, and a couple of those businesses through a agri-culinary microgrant to see where they were, and then here you are 5 years later doing an expansion because they were so successful, and knowing that our work together had a foot in that process is pretty gratifying. So thank you all. Appreciate you.
Thank you. If I don't have already, and I might, so that's why I give that caveat, would you mind just sharing the digital version of the annual report and a link to maybe that video, if there is a link, so I could share it with all the members of the legislature, just so that they could get a copy of just those two things focused in an email?
Actually, Taylor has it already.
You have it already?
Yep.
Okay, all right. I don't know, I figured it was somewhere. Thank you.
Sure, yes.
Yeah, Taylor, if we could share that out with the group, that would be great, including the video if we can. Thank you. All right, well, thanks, Peggy.
Thank you.
And next, we have Jennifer Tavares, Chamber of Commerce President, with the Chamber Housing Task Force update, and that's ID 12263. So Jennifer, I will turn it over to you to introduce this topic.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Y'all talk about a lot of housing here, and you know a lot more about a lot of aspects of this than I do, so I'm grateful for your time. I did just want to say, great job, Peggy. Having this report end on the note of the agri-culinary grant program makes me feel really great, because that was actually an idea that I brought here because I was the chair of our Ag Economic Development Committee in my last job, and we had a very similar program in Shenango County, and we didn't have anything like that here. And I'm just grateful that the tourism program and the county were receptive and allowing us to build that program and create a new microgrant program to support our industry partners. It's been just wonderful to watch it grow from just a few $1,000s to the program it is today. So just want to share that and thank you all. And from my perspective, I've been grateful to watch that. So again, thanks for the time today. Everyone received everything I'm going to share up here on the screen in your packet. Please know that some of this is probably more sort of work in progress form. This is me sharing out to you all the recommendations and a lot of essentially the highest level bullet point version of a lot of conversations, and I mean hours and hours of research, conversations, brainstorming, sort of additional work that various members of the Housing Task Force did over a very, well over a year. We had quite an array of different folks involved in this task force, representing a lot of different local governments, planning departments, staff, elected officials, different partner organizations, the business community, our largest employers. Lots of folks from a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives participate in this group. And just want to sort of mention the initial premise of why we brought everyone together is just that over a very long period of time now, we've had specific goals around housing development as a community. We've had a lot of successes of adding housing of certain types to the community. I know you're all aware and will remember many years ago, we had set certain targets for certain types of housing. Related to affordable housing targets, middle and moderate income targets for single-family homes, for mixed family homes, condominium development, senior family housing, senior housing, and also student purpose-built housing, certain goals around market rate versus affordable, and all the things in between that we thought or hoped were going to happen. And, the market and the tools that we have at our disposal as a community, and it's not just our community, I'm sure everyone's very familiar about this is going on everywhere, right? So we know we're not alone or unique here, but the tools that everyone has been using and has at their disposal to help incent development are really geared towards either affordable housing, or the market is currently set up well to build higher end expensive housing, but we are really, really struggling in any kind of meaningful way to build everything else, right? And the reason we, again, as the chamber, as an economic development organization, as an advocacy organization, we sit through meetings with businesses, with other community partners, with folks concerned about workforce and concerned about the long-term sustainability of our community in many ways on a daily or weekly basis, where housing comes up as everyone's #1 concern or barrier to attracting, recruiting, retaining the workforce that they need, or seeing our pathway to growing the economy that we want to have that supports, again, all kinds of folks living in all kinds of housing throughout our community. So the landscape is a little bit, the community is doing a really good job in many ways, building and adding affordable housing units, adding market rate units, adding student purpose-built units. We are falling drastically short of our goals around single-family home development, moderate and middle-class housing, if you will, the missing middle. I'm sure you've all heard it defined. So we set about to say, okay, what can we do differently? What tools are we not using? What resources do we not have here? What best practices are people employing in other places that perhaps we're not using here? how can we really focus on actually, in a measurable way, increasing the construction and delivery of those types of units in Tompkins County. And from the start, recognizing this is not a problem that's going to be solved in 6 or 12 months. It is a multi-year problem. I mean, we're really talking about, you're talking about such a substantial shortfall that you're talking about needing, you know, a decade to see some of this even out. And again, I want to just underscore this point. Our workforce shortfalls and our demographic circumstances are a big part of why we look at this and say, this is, you know, an emergency. We're in an emergency situation if we can't really do something to get ahead of this. And we also are looking at regionally what's going on in the region. We have a workforce shortfall here. We have not enough housing for the people who want to live and work here now, for the people who might come here. Again, at all kinds of income levels and job levels. And the inability to sort of solve that problem is going to hold us back economically. It's holding back a number of employers. It's keeping vacancies open. It's preventing people from being able to move forward at a number of levels. And we've even heard that from the county itself. So again, clarifying the problem, we early on talked about redefining workforce housing or defining workforce housing because there's a lot of different definitions floating out there, and there's perhaps some need for updating there. How can we collaborate at a lot of different levels for solutions or to enhance our toolbox, and what specific recommendations might come out of all of this effort and all this work? And so, you know, we haven't solved every problem. We've had probably at times more questions than answers. Just a really brief overview. You know, we developed a charter and a work scope for the committee early on. We identified and defined some of these key issues that I just, you know, briefly tried to introduce. We had the benefit of a group of Johnson Fellows from Cornell partnering with us to help with some of the research work. So they did an actual, a rather comprehensive overview of the policy landscape in the entire county. So what that required was actually looking at comprehensive plans, stated goals around housing development or around infrastructure development, actual policies in place in different municipalities countywide, identifying places where the stated goals or policies that were desired by a particular municipality might actually not be being supported by the policies that are in place, and also using that as a way, in terms of defining the entire landscape for the whole county, using that as a way to identify and prioritize the places where there may be more promise than others of being able to, you know, see a significant increase in the number of housing units in those areas. I mentioned that defining of workforce housing. I'm just going to go through some materials provided by the students. We talked a lot about identifying, you know, I know you're all aware there's been work ongoing for many years now around identifying different nodes of the community, considering things like infrastructure, childcare, transportation, access to shopping, et cetera. So just not talking about let's go find all the rural land out in the hinterlands and build a lot of houses there, right? Just the understanding of there needs to be proximity to some of these pieces of infrastructure. The work of sort of trying to overlay the water sewer capacity identified in the IAED water sewer study with the nodes that the county had identified. And I'm going to just sort of asterisk this and say there's more work to understand our infrastructure constraints that we have an opportunity to pursue in the next couple months. But some of that work and consideration is what the students were looking at and what our work groups were looking at. And then again, a lot of conversation and identification of tools, best practices, what other communities are doing, interesting ways that people have tried to tackle this problem. Just going to briefly show this to you. This is basically a nice sort of infographic that walks someone through illustrating the problem and helping use some of the data available to us to help understand the problem. And it suggests that instead of using the same definition that had been used previously, that we need to expand our perspective of what workforce housing means and what the definition of that might be from an income level perspective, and really say, there's already affordable housing incentives and programs that will support housing development at certain income levels. And the challenge of really moving our definition and our resources into that next level housing, this, I just want to mention, goes to sort of what I heard Deb Dawson talking about and mentioning at, the last legislature meeting that I was at. I think people are just really starting to understand and be aware that we really need to start thinking about things more broadly in terms of income levels and what tools and what resources might go towards supporting different types of housing development. So that was a recommendation that, that came out. Just want to sort of, this is a helping demonstrate the income and those levels and what percentages of residents in Tompkins County are at these different levels in terms of being eligible for certain types of housing and certain types of support. Again, just wanted to note, we're going to work on updating this data with the newly revised numbers, but at the time when the students pulled this together, that data wasn't available yet. Just helps sort of illustrate what percentage of people at different levels are still having problems affording housing, but not eligible for some of the supports that are available. They pulled together some of the goals and the stated ranges, the goal ranges for each type of housing that I referenced earlier that had been summarized in the last housing strategy, and sort of did some benchmarking around what was intended to be done during a 10-year period versus sort of the actual built to date. So again, this helps demonstrate, which I know Brent Katzman also shared in his PowerPoint just a couple weeks ago, really just helps demonstrate sort of the really substantial shortfall in certain types of housing and why we still have such a tight market and why it's still so challenging. The other thing, and without, this is a demonstration of the increase of how much more challenging it has become since the pandemic started or since the year prior to the pandemic to now. We all know there's a lot of different ways that the pandemic exacerbated this issue for our community, but there's, the sort of the bottleneck with people being able to list properties. There's no place else to go, nothing else to buy. There's the interest rate circumstances. There's just a lot of different circumstances that are factoring into the decline in actual listings and actual inventory, the price increases in that same period, and the decrease in actual affordability over this period. You already know the real estate sales numbers. These comp numbers over those periods are in this little summary as well. I know that Brent shared those. And then again, some graphs which help illustrate how our housing burden here is so much more substantial than all the counties around us, which again, I know that everybody here already knows. Just wanted to share this with you again. This was, that water sewer study is a really big document. It's not necessarily easy for everyone to wrap their arms around. The students sort of took a lot of the information in that study and consolidated it down into a chart that we can sort of refer to quickly to understand what the circumstances are countywide. And again, as we've talked about this in the work groups, we understand that there are also potentially in some of the areas where capacity could be increased, there's not necessarily receptiveness to that, or there might be some resistance to that. So that's where we need to start talking about having some conversations, doing some advocacy, seeing which partners in the community need to get around the table to have those discussions and see whether we can see any better outcomes or increases in capacity there. But this is the, based on the existing capacity today and pulling all of this information together and checking some of it again with some of these partners and getting more current information, the projected total potential units that could be added with just the capacity we have now, which is a substantial number. That is a very substantial number. So, that is, I think, a positive highlight. The piece of the infrastructure, I think there's some more work to do with understanding the infrastructure limitations. When we hear this issue talked about, we talk a lot about water sewer capacity. We talk a lot about roads and delivering roads or helping build out some of that infrastructure. I think a challenge that doesn't come up as often that I'm hoping we have someone who's an intern that's interested in focusing on infrastructure for the summer and perhaps into the fall to help do some of this work. But understanding the pain points and the capacity, the expansion difficulties that we have with our electricity infrastructure, with our utility infrastructure, and further overlaying those capacity challenges with the areas that have been targeted for housing expansion. I have a newer understanding, I would say, in terms of the actual timeline that is needed for NYSEG as our core utility provider to actually plan for increased capacity and a substantial increase in demand in some areas of the county. They need to be a partner on the front end, and we really I just have not in any of my conversations heard people talk about including that piece of our infrastructure as we look at the housing needs countywide. I think further talking about broadband and talking about some of the other services that people expect, looking again, that TCAT challenge and some of those other transportation challenges, I think we have some more work to do to really understand all of the different types of infrastructure, what the opportunity areas and pain points are, and figure out where funding would actually be helpful or where collaborations would actually be helpful in terms of solving some of those problems. So I'm going to try to run through these sort of briefly. I'm not going to go into each of the tactics under these key strategy areas, but there were several main areas that the group recommended that we focus on moving forward. One is, despite there being different amounts of receptiveness to this and the understanding of this continues to evolve, that as many municipalities as we can have file for pro-housing designation, and as much as could be done to support that happening. Not every municipality has the same capacity directly on staff. Some of them may need some additional consulting support. Some of them may need some support from the county planning department or others, that we should be trying to attain that status as much as possible countywide. And there are some different ways that other counties in the region are tackling this that might be useful to consider as we move forward. Directly engaging developers more to better understand the needs and barriers. That's something that we've talked about a lot over the years. Developers are very happy to sort of share and have been both surveyed and participated in a number of different conversations over the years related to sort of what they see and what the landscape is from their perspective. But we felt that it would still be useful to share some of the landscape document and some of this research work that helps synthesize everything with some of those folks and get some more specific recommendations from them. The other piece that came out as a very strong recommendation is to explore more deeply modular and manufactured housing as a potential solution. If you really want to scale something like this, doing it one by one stick-built in the most expensive way possible is probably not how we're going to get there. And so there are regionally manufactured housing and panelized housing companies that we could discuss having relationships with. Some of these recommendations you'll see if you started to maybe stack some of these ideas together, you might actually really be able to break through some barriers. But talked about developing comprehensive lists of all the developers and all the potential companies we could be partnering with as we tried to employ some new strategies. I think a really critical piece that the group wants to communicate, and I think there's going to be some different settings where this happens, is that maintaining the existing tax abatement programs we have is really critical. If you look around this community and you try to quantify the housing unit construction over the last decade, and you were to take away the tax abatement programs that helped all those housing units get built, we would be in a very, very different place. And so there's a continuing need for education around how tax abatements actually work, because there's a whole lot of folks who, unfortunately don't understand that. But that is a tool that we need to not let that tool slip. We need to actually build off of that tool and look at some other creative ways that tool can be used. Some other ideas that have been discussed along the way and I think are worth doing additional research and consideration on are, expanding or having a secondary housing land trust program, looking at a local development corporation that is specifically utilized for housing development, exploring, with some of the communities in the county that are more interested in seeing housing developed. There may be smaller micro versions of some tax abatement programs or some unique economic development tools that could be used in some of those communities. The next couple of ideas are really more around reducing the actual barrier and the time to construction and the cost that's accumulated during that process, right? So if we think about the fact that a lot of times people might propose a project, it might be workshopped several times in committee, they might be sent back to spend more money on their design with their architects and their planners, et cetera. Sometimes before people actually can get to approval process, they are millions of dollars in their development timeline, and that is a big part of what makes it more expensive to build projects here. If we sort of flipped that around and said, okay, we all agree we need more housing, we want these types of housing, and here are the places where we think it would be good to put it. And we're going to reduce the barriers to development in those areas. The municipalities and or the taxing jurisdictions or whomever the decision makers are on the front end are already in agreement. If you propose this project or a project that looks and feels like this and meets these criteria, we're going to get out of your way and we're going to let it happen. And here's the tools that we're going to make available to you to do that. It's basically taking the entire process and flipping it upside down and putting the chicken before the egg, or whichever way you want to talk about that. So, you know, this was an idea that had a lot of traction. Figuring out how to work with, zoning, work with our different approval processes, with our different municipalities, identifying 3 or 5 sites where this could actually be done, and folks are willing to consider doing this, where there'd be a substantial addition of housing units, and really looking at it and saying, here's what we want built here, and shopping that around to some developers who are willing to come and build it, and figuring out how to create the landscape on the front end that would actually facilitate that development. A similar idea is, people talk about shovel-ready sites pertaining to commercial properties all the time, to industrial properties. There are efforts regionally going on to identify more industrial shovel-ready sites. I'm sure you've heard about it. I'm sure it was in Heather's report, but we were talking about that as a concept that could be also utilized to facilitate housing development. And there are new tools, new potential resources, funding opportunities that can be looked at to help facilitate that. Increasing capacity for this issue and for this part of this issue is something that we're interested in advocating for. Again, I know a tremendous amount of energy and staff time and resources are being put into all of our housing issues in this community, our municipal staff time, a lot of nonprofit staff time, et cetera. But I think, our recommendation is that we also need to put some of those resources into the workforce housing side and frankly, the senior housing side. As our demographic profile continues to shift over time and as all of the population data continues to tell us that we are retaining our senior population, which is wonderful. People would like to stay here. We need to create housing that will give people a place to go and an additional opportunity of a place to live in the long term. That isn't necessarily them being stuck in a 2,000 or 3,000 square foot full family home that they don't have any option to leave and that's not accessible and all the other things. So really looking at how can we facilitate some more of those types of development. If there was more support and funding or staffing at the county planning department and the IT department, that might be helpful. One thing that was noted, again, is some of our neighboring communities, the GIS mapping help and some of those specific pieces of technical assistance that smaller communities might need are some of the areas where those functions are being centralized and everyone's sort of collaborating to just get the work done and problem solve it. And so there's some interest in seeing how that might look here. And then again, a number of other this is we're in the advocacy side of the universe here now, supporting policies and different types of projects that will help ease market pressures over time. So this is probably very obvious, but short-term rental restrictions or policies, continuing to give those a hard look, supporting them when appropriate, accessory dwelling units as a strategy, supporting projects like the Southworks project redevelopment that has a huge capacity to add a meaningful number of housing units in the community. I'm really hoping we will get back to supporting or seeing other projects on the West End, part of Ithaca, proposed, again, Cornell purpose student-built housing to the extent that there's proposals coming down the pipeline for that, and I already mentioned senior housing. And then this slide is really more some of the strategies we discussed as the Housing Task Force that we could use to help people better understand the issue, some talking points, some materials, some case studies, some local examples where people have been successful and seen different outcomes, telling the story of how did they do what they did and how did they get there, and really sort of countering, again, a lot of times I think on this issue, there's a few louder voices, or there's a few folks who might be resistant to projects or more housing, but they may not actually represent the majority of opinions on this issue. So figuring out how to engage more of the community in this issue and helping them understand and champion the cause of actually increasing and adding our housing units as a county. So I'm almost done. I'm sorry this is taking so long. This is, 15 months worth of work I'm trying to summarize in a few slides here. So I mentioned we have someone who's starting as an intern who has a very deep interest in focusing on infrastructure development and has some background and a strong resume in that regard. So some of that work is going to be starting soon. Those developer conversations I mentioned, some of the advocacy work. There is, again, further research and further examples that we can be gathering and sharing. And then we are also, and I think as a community, we need to figure out who's going to do what can land where, who has existing capacity, or how do we grow our capacity for more of us to be involved in helping move this issue forward and continue to make progress on it. I do just want to briefly mention, we did just get a small grant from the Community Foundation, which is helping support this work and helping our costs associated with the Housing Task Force and to compensate our intern. So that's wonderful that they're investing in this, and I just wanted to give them a little shout out. So I'll stop because you may have questions or you may be ready to go. I don't know. Thank you.
I'll open it up to members of the committee. Mike?
I was just curious how the town reception has been to the state housing, what is it, Housing First? I know Dryden's done well, and the city of Ithaca is now in. I've asked Lansing if they would be joining. I have not heard.
So I know some people who have had conversations with a number of different municipalities. I think the receptiveness is different, or the perception about it is different depending on who you talk to. I think some of it will depend directly on how much support or technical assistance might be available, or how costly they perceive that process to be. I mean, if we had a person, and you've got some comments on this too, but like if we had a way to make it really easy and inexpensive. I think, again, there are certain funding streams which are now being attached to this, and whether it's a few extra points on an application or whether it really actually means your application might not be approved is a concern, and that when some of these initial conversations were happening, that wasn't really 100% clear or clarified yet in the state budget. And, I know some of the municipalities might say, well, don't care, we don't want any more housing anyway, or we don't think we want those funding sources anyway, and those might be longer conversations, or, I think how we approach this and who's having the conversation, and it's not we're coming and telling you to do this, we're recommending that this would be a good thing to do, and here's why, and how can we help, so please jump in, Katie.
If we could just stop sharing so I could see if there's anybody on the screen who also wants to dive into the conversation. Thanks. I know Megan's on as well. So Katie, if you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I would just say that I think that all the municipalities were waiting to see what the pro-housing meant, and there was a lot of back and forth on whether it's going to be required for these programs or just points for the program. So I think now that that's a little more clear, there are more people that might be interested in talking about that. We did have our first municipal planning group meeting with our county staff offering to support municipal planners working on housing issues. And so that kickoff meeting did happen, and this was a topic of conversation. I see Megan unmuted, and she actually went to the meeting and I didn't, so I'll let her talk about it.
Yeah, I'll just say that everybody is very aware of the program, and there is actually some money that kind of surprised everyone in the CFA this year, the consolidated funding application. Oddly enough, it's not eligible for residential development. That's another conversation to be had, but I think the municipalities are focused on if they're interested in pursuing funding that this would help, sooner rather than later for them. They're bumping it up in their work programs, and others are, kind of shuffling their priorities if the grants that this certification helps with are not kind of as pressing for them.
Mike, does that? Great. Other questions, members of the committee? Ann?
Yes, when you talk about, and I've heard this before, the facilitate as of right development process, when we think about it, for agricultural uses, we see food as something we desperately need. And so to me, well, not to me, I think it's a fact that we are in a housing crisis. So I like the idea of, looking at all of these, things that the group has come up with. But just that one kind of just stood out to me because that's what I've been hearing from developers for a long time. And, trying to see, not just in my district, but across the county, when you see housing trying to get built in different areas, there's just a lot of pushback, or there's a lot of push back, push sideways, different things that slow down the process, make it very hard, and then, as you said, put in, run up at so much additional costs, which makes then, and then when often the project is ready to go, if it can go forward, and then you have what I've seen is people in the community going, well, why can't you do this and that in the project? And sometimes, and a lot of times it's because all this money was eaten up trying to do all this, the other things that they wanted to do for community benefits or benefits for the folks living there.
Yeah, that cost increase, and again, I didn't really, I'm sure this tactic might have been mentioned there. It certainly was mentioned a lot in the task force group, but, some type of infrastructure fund that can be matched with the developer's own cash to help with some of those infrastructure pain points would be incredible. Oddly enough, that was actually a recommendation that we made as part of our coming out of the pandemic economic development strategy, was that we work as a community to establish an infrastructure fund. I think there are some really interesting things happening in some places that do require really forward-thinking and creative public-private partnerships, right? And sometimes it might require a little bit of risk. It might be requiring a little bit of willingness to finance some things, to bond some things. I think this is an emergent enough issue in this community. And again, I look at it and I say, so you don't want more housing in your town, but you also don't want your school to keep having to increase taxes, and you don't want your town to stop delivering services, and you don't want your property taxes to go up. And at some point, something's got to give, and you can only, you all know better than I do, you can only trim budgets so much, you can only trim so many staff positions, and then you can't function anymore, right? And so without actually expanding the tax base and making it so more people can live here, more people can afford to buy houses here and afford to live here. And I don't know how we actually build a community in the long term where some of this evens itself back out, right? If we stay on the path we're on, I very much believe this, and again, I welcome anyone to argue with me about this. We might need to go have a cocktail or something, but we're building a place where only very wealthy people and only people who get support with their housing can actually afford to live. and afford their housing, right? And we want everybody at all kinds of income levels with all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of jobs and family structures and everything else to be able to, if they choose to, recognizing not everyone wants to live here, not everyone wants to move into this county, but we have to figure out how to build a community that people can live in and that can sustain itself economically speaking. And I think this is the absolute biggest impediment to us getting there.
Katie?
I would just say that this is not a Tompkins County issue.
I know.
It's an issue throughout the state, throughout the nation, around the world right now. So it's not just us, and we'll try to solve the problem as best we can, but I think we need to remember that there are global forces at work that are causing this problem.
I 100% agree with you, and I did mention that earlier. I do just want to say I'm not sitting here with rose-colored glasses on. I will just say I just referred to a set of recommendations that came out of a similar task force based up in central New York, had several of the same recommendations in their list that we have. This is a statewide thing, and thank you to someone shared this to me the other day, but Vermont just issued a housing toolkit that basically tells people exactly how to go about building infill housing, ADUs, housing that can get approved for development, and it's really compelling, you know what I mean? So I just want to say, I know it's not just us, but I also think if
Vermont state laws are completely different.
Sure. Sure. But again, it's we can put some things on our wish list and do some advocacy and see what might be possible, but just encouraging that we get a little bit more creative, that we might need to open ourselves up to some new tools. We certainly, can't stress this enough, but we don't want to see tools that we do have now falling off the table. And some of those conversations come up with some regularity in the community. So, yeah, I agree with you, Katie, 100%.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah.
I do want to thank the task force for all your work on this, and it's really great timing for us having Shauna come on board and fresh eyes from her perspective and these new recommendations that you guys worked so hard on pulling together. It gives us a lot of food for thought and a lot of different directions that could be considered, and look forward to continuing working with you.
Yeah, I think my biggest takeaway, and Katie, thanks for saying that, and Jennifer, thanks for the presentation, and I know there was a lot of staff time at the chamber, and all of the participants who participated in the task force, from people in school districts and private enterprise and the municipal planners and folks from the county level. It was really a truly collaborative process, and I think that's what this really requires to solve this issue. The county's not going to be able to strike a pen and solve this problem. Nope. The chamber's not, IAED, IDA, Tompkins County Development Corporation, whatever the case may be, Cornell, maybe Cornell could. But just throwing that out there, Cornell, if you're listening. I think that
they've been at the table, and we've been talking with them too.
Course.
So yes, just
they are
going to say that on their behalf since they're not here.
Good partners in the process, as well as all of the colleges and academic institutions. It's just so important that we stay focused, and those groups and those areas in which you can affect, you start to really impact and affect changes, right? There's things that the county can do that I know Katie and Megan and team are committed to working through their work plan and making those happen. The things that the chamber can do, the things that we need to advocate at the state level with our assembly members and state senators and governor. So it really takes a full-on collaborative approach, and I do believe that we have a strong missing middle, but I also think we have a strong middle that's sort of sheltered in place right now, that's either craving to trade up or, to Ann's earlier point, trade down, downsize, right, to create some movement within the market itself. And so I've always been a strong advocate for a variety of housing stock, and I do truly believe that for sale homes is a way to really build wealth and help create generational opportunity within a community, as long as those homes are affordable for the people that are buying them. And you don't become I'll use the term house poor, right? Where everything you're going to work to make goes towards supporting your living. And so we really need to try to attract, the way we try to attract other economic development is how do we get some large national or regional home builders or things like that that, you know, maybe have a little bit more to invest in areas and really bring them to the table and show that this is a community that's supportive of some large scale projects. We have the land to do it in certain parts of our community. We just need to get the infrastructure and the communities on board and support those projects. So I'm looking forward to seeing what comes out of this and what we can do next. And I know this was just sort of an introduction for this group, but I hope we can keep the conversation going here and continue to make this a further, you know, a very intense priority for our community and for our legislature. With that, any other questions for Jennifer? All right, well, I appreciate the time.
Thanks for your time and your patience.
Thank you so much.
For the planning department's good work as well. They've been very helpful and engaged in the process, so
yeah,
grateful. Yep.
Yeah, Megan, who just popped off.
Who went off screen. Megan especially. Yeah. Thanks.
You all have in your packet the IAED, the Ithaca Area Economic Development June report. This is for information purposes only. So if there's any questions, feel free to, you can follow up with myself or Ann, or with, and I say myself or Ann because we're both on the board for that, or with Heather McDaniel directly, but that's there for informational purposes. Any reports from members of the committee?
I just wanted to say something real quick.
Go ahead, Ann.
So at the IAED Executive Committee today, one of the things that was brought up in addition to going over this report was that them hiring a consultant to do like overall, and pardon me if I'm not getting the term correctly, but an overall economic plan for the county. And so one of the questions came up was how to engage in, you know, with legislators. And, you know, we talked about, you know, well, if there's more than two of us from the same committee, I don't know if you know, if you could, if you or somebody, you know, or through the administration, if we can figure out how to have something where we can all participate. Because I know we've done things before with consultants, you know, that we kind of have an event where we can all go and we kind of brainstorm off of each other versus kind of getting interviewed separately. So anyway, that was just something that I came up today. And so I'm really hoping that we can all, as many of us as possible, can help, you know, to do it together with maybe with some staff, because I think we kind of build off each other.
Great. Yeah, happy to support that process in any way necessary. Thanks for sharing that, Ann. We'll definitely look forward to those opportunities. Any other committee member reports? All right, well, seeing none, it is 4:51. Do I need a motion to adjourn again, Taylor? No. All right, if there's no objection to adjourning, enjoy the rest of the day, everybody. Thanks so much.
And just as a note, I know we're off, but at the idea